Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Alexi Bailey, and this is the Tell It Like It Is podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, James Ravenel. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Alexi. It's a long time no speak to, so it's good to have this chat with you today.
Yeah, man. So glad you could join me. Uh, so much has been happening since the last time I saw you, right? The world
Oh,
shut
yeah.
down. We thought that life was over. We were locked up, and all of our races got canceled. All of our events, weddings, everything went to Zoom, man.
Yep.
How you been holding
Okay.
up?
Uh, it's been an interesting time, obviously. I don't think I'm any worse for the wear than anybody else who's had this lived experience of this pandemic. You know, experienced some loss of friends. You know, loss of friends. But we're still here, still kicking. And
COVID deaths?
yeah, I had several friends who passed away from COVID, and complications after COVID. Um, I have some friends who are still, um, months later dealing with all kinds of symptoms. Young people, young healthy people. I have a friend who still can't walk. I have a friend who still can't smell anything. It's been like over a year. I have a friend who just recovered from the Delta variant, and she was fully vaccinated with J&J. Um, I have
Well, they make
friends who,
they make fun of J&J for having the least coverage, right? So
yeah,
so that
yeah.
person's probably wishing they had gotten Moderna or Pfizer at this point.
It's funny, right? I don't want to say funny. It, people do joke about it. They call it like the JV of
Right.
the vaccines, but I got J&J as well. I was happy to get a vaccination, to be honest. I didn't know. I mean, I knew that I think what they call the efficacy rate was lower, but I will take that over nothing, and so I did. My friend who I was just talking about, that person's now going to get the Pfizer, I think. I think they're going to go get Pfizer now. There's been a lot of studies about kind of mixing the vaccines and increasing your odds of staying healthy and safe. And for as much as we don't have all the answers about what these vaccines will do long term, I've seen personally what it can do short term, by having friends who are no longer here. So to me, I'd rather have the something over nothing.
Well, there's a group in the population that think COVID is just like the flu. It's not a big deal. Some people say it's not real. And you're saying, young, healthy people who got COVID and
Yeah, man. I think you don't know how it will affect. You don't know how COVID will affect you, and so one of my friends that can barely walk now used to coach. I mean, coach basketball. He can barely walk right now.
yeah, none of this
Um,
makes any sense.
So I think sometimes you know we don't see the bigger picture of things, and people are like, oh well, I don't trust this and I don't trust that. But you get in a car every day, you get on a bus, you get on a train. That's all science and physics. It's all science. It's all mathematics. It's all the things that people have spent their lives researching to make it available to us. People say, oh, I don't trust this and that. But you go to McDonald's, you go get pizza down at the corner. A lot of that's, I mean, let's keep it real. There's some science in there. So people pick and choose what they trust. And I don't want to tell anybody what to do. Um, I would hope that people can see the bigger picture of why these things are important. Um,
these things have been highly politicized, especially with the election and all of these things, and not to mention their historical experience and all of these, you know, people are just distrustful in general.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I get that, right? I think balance. I think balance matters. If you look at the theme of my life and how I assess things, you will see the recurring theme is trying to reach some balance. Obviously, uh, Tuskegee and us being experimented on is a very real thing, and it's not that long ago, right? Um, but also, a lot of us are the people who have been dying, right? With uh, an opportunity for us to not have to die from this very real life threat in COVID when a vaccine is being presented to us. And a lot of the research that was done on this vaccine was by a Black woman. So there's got to be some balance and in how people assess what makes sense. Um,
Are you familiar with the Event 201? Have you heard about this?
sounds familiar, but refresh me.
So this was a pandemic exercise that they have been practicing on since 2019. So basically, they did a run through of everything with the short term, the short term lockdown turning into long term, and the political unrest, the economy falling, the lack of availability of vaccine, and all of the things that happened. They basically did a run through of this before, and Bill Gates was like the head of that, and he was all wrapped up in that. And so the thing is that a lot of people, the narrative is that, like, oh my gosh, no one knew that this could happen, no one predicted, no one saw this coming, this came out of the blue. So basically they had everything planned out leading up to this moment, like including the slow reopening and all of these things. So to kind of say like we were unprepared, because Bill Gates said that a lot, we were so unprepared, but he was very much prepared, and he was prepared for how unprepared we were. So it just kind of felt to me like it wasn't just this all surprise. It's kind of like when 9/11 happened. The minute 9/11 happened, we ran straight into a war, right? And the war wasn't to keep America safe. The war was to take advantage of the Middle East and all of these things that we're still in Afghanistan, and it's almost like 20 years later. So my point is, the pandemic, to most of us, was a shock out of the blue. Kobe Bryant died. We were still like looking at that, and then the next thing we know, it was lockdown. But there were people out there who were very much prepared for this thing, almost to the point where we felt like they caused it.
but we should have been prepared. I mean, you know, we got caught with our pants down with previous, you know, pandemics, right? And I'm not a political scientist, so I don't study everything to the T. I'm not a historian, so I don't study everything to the T. Um, but the Obama administration did put together like a task force or committee to study this type of event. Um, and that task force committee, whatever you want to call it, was, as far as I understand, was dismantled or defunded. I'm not sure. I don't have all the details. But this is one of those situations where we either knew or should have known that this could be a thing. We're not, the United States is not a small country. We have almost unlimited resources. This is a thing that we should have been prepared for. And to think that we weren't, um, I don't get into conspiracy, but I do I do wonder, um, what are the motives for getting rid of a committee that's there to prepare us for the worst while hoping for the best, right?
You don't get into conspiracy because it's not real, or you don't know, or so you don't like. Why not?
Because to me, most conspiracy lives on the extreme. And again, as you heard me say just a few minutes ago, I think in balance. I like to be here. I don't like to exist on the extreme. Um, there's there's a there's a line from the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and he says, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, you know, triumph, you think that you have become this great victorious thing, and disaster, you think that things are so bad, when the truth is, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. So you treat those two imposters just the same. Be even kill, be balanced, be humble, be alert, be attentive, stay grounded. To me, those are the things that help me to be who I am. So when I think of like conspiracy, they're usually things that are more on the extreme side. Um, and so that's why I don't really get into them. I would hear somebody out, um, but I ultimately will try to make the most sense of the information that's being shared with me.
So the conspiracy theorist is presenting you the extreme, but you're somewhere in the middle. So it's at least partially true in your mind.
No, I'm not saying it's partially true. When I say I'm in the middle of like being open to hearing the information. Um, but I don't necessarily believe everything that's been said. I mean, you can hear a conspiracy. Um, I wish I can remember that guy's name. He's always on. He's been banned from a bunch of different platforms. Says a lot of inflammatory things. I wish I can remember his name. But you know, he says a lot.
Where do you get your information from?
Um, I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. I watch the news. I read blogs. I read social media. I watch the CNNs. I watch Fox. I watch um, MSNBC. Um, I watch some news, these little local news networks that sometimes just give you the data.
I'm
Um,
sure you're critical of all of it.
well, you have to be, right? Um, uh, People, when I tell people I listen to Fox, they're like, why do you listen to Fox? And I'm like, well, it's good to have a well-rounded perspective of what people think about the same subject, right? And if I mean, I traditionally vote Democrat, but if you really ask me, I'm more of a moderate independent, right? Um, you know, I voted for Republicans because I thought that they were the best candidate, right? I want the best person. Um, I don't want the best party. I want the best person to represent me and my vote. And
You look like you were going to say Bush.
Bush, no, I didn't vote for Bush.
Which Republican have you voted for?
I have voted for like in New York City mayoral races. Uh,
Okay. What's his name? The billionaire was a Republican, right?
Bloomberg, yeah.
What's his
You
name?
know, if you look when Bloomberg was running,
Yeah, yeah.
when he was running the first time, and you compared him to his opponents, like the policies from his opponents just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
I like Bloomberg. I felt like he wasn't racist, he was practical.
yeah, I mean, he made his mistakes. I mean, you know, I don't want to um, say that he was a perfect mayor. He made a lot of mistakes. He made a lot of errors in judgment. Um, but I think, depending on what's important to you, he made some improvements.
Right.
I don't think I don't think any politician is perfect.
Sure. Nobody's perfect. Right.
Yeah.
No one's
And they
perfect.
don't all get it right. They don't, and a lot of them, come in as saying that they're not politicians. But after a while, you become a politician, right?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Most people feel like politics is a scam, right? You come in, you say one thing, and you have an agenda in your pocket, but you say something else, and then little by little, your agenda is what you do, and you totally ignore all the things you said before you got elected. That's a normal perception about it.
And you know what I think about that? I hear all the time when I'm listening to politicians speak. We have our, House reps, we have our senators, governors, but in particular, when I hear House reps and senators talk, and they've been in their positions for 15, 30 years.
Politicians.
And I say to myself, you know, many of them have been doing it for so long that they forget that they're there to represent their people, and they won't stand up for truth, no matter what that truth is, um, because they're afraid of losing their job. And I'm like, you hear people in the news, you know, these anchors and um, talking heads, because every network has the talking heads.
Right.
Right? They all try to make the other ones worse than the other, but they all have talking heads. They all have opinionated, voices. And the one thing that I hear that just I would never really understand is them talking about people not standing up because they're afraid of like the hammer coming down. They're afraid of that being the death of their career. Yo, your job is supposed to be to represent the people, not represent your job, represent the people. And to think that so many of these politicians will not do the right thing because they're afraid of losing their job. Listen, I don't want to lose my job, just like no one. I don't think anybody wants to lose their job. But I'm also when I'm working, I'm representing myself and my family. I'm not representing thousands of families, millions of families. And so, you know, when you have that power, you should have a greater expectation um, placed upon you. And
Speaking ideologically now.
say again,
We're speaking ideologically.
of course,
You're
because
saying, hey man, you took this role, you took this oath. You're supposed to live the ideological life. And the reality is, like you said, you have a job too. And at the end of the day, you don't want to lose your job. So
I
when
don't.
your boss comes to you and tells you, hey man, this is what you got to do, you're more likely to do it because you want to keep your job. You're not thinking
But
about the greater good of humanity and all of these things.
but you said my boss. Who is the boss of these politicians? The
Not us.
people. Yes, it is us. It is us, the people. It's our responsibility to hold our politicians accountable.
I mean, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. But I think the reality, most people would easily agree that, these politicians are not worried about us. They're worried about, the financial backing that keeps them afloat, not the votes as much.
We're saying the same thing from a different perspective.
I
When I
agree. We're on the
we're saying the same thing. What I'm saying is, yeah, you're right. They're not worried about us. They should be worried about us. They should be advocating for us and not themselves and not their interest.
fix that.
How do we fix that?
Yeah.
I don't know if we have enough time to say how we fix that. I can tell you, um, one of the things is speaking up as individuals, forming groups, and speaking as blocks, voting as blocks, um, creating power with your vote and your voice. I think so. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, um, and I remember we had a candidate that was running for a specific office years ago, and this person was kind of anti-college brother, and it really troubled a lot of us, and we decided that we were not going to let we were not going to allow this alumni brother, excuse me a second,
Mm.
we decided we were not going to allow this alumni brother to come in to office and railroad us college brothers. So I rallied the brothers together from all of I got a representative from every chapter in our district. And I said, hey, here are the things that this person has said.
Who is this? What's his name?
I'm not going to say his name.
But you did something political. You stood up to someone who was running, right?
I did. And so let me just finish this real quick. So I brought them together and I said, hey, this is where this person stands. This is what they have said. This is history. Here are the facts. If we do not want this person in power, one of the things that we can do, an option, is to vote together. If we all vote as a block and we all decide that this is what we're going to do, we can impact change. We can have impact. We can have a candidate that does represent us in office, and then hold that candidate accountable to what they said that they were going to do. And we did that. Um, we voted as a block. It was like a landslide victory for someone who thought that they were going to win. And then, what we did is the brother that ended up taking that position, we were like, yo, remember, you said you were going to do these things. And we followed up and followed through to make sure that brother did what he was supposed to
So
do.
this was on a local level, right?
That was on a local level.
So a part of the reason why you don't want to say the name is, I'm getting away from that, is to say that you're worried about there being some kind of repercussions.
No, no, it's not repercussions. I just don't want to out somebody's, you know, it, I don't want to make the brother feel bad.
Okay. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, I'll tell you what I think. At the end of the day, it's very much clear to me that there is people in power and people want to keep people in power. And there's a lot of those people who aren't thinking about you and me. So you're saying the yous and me's of the world have to get together and consolidate their power, vote in a certain way, and move in a certain way so that they can get better representation.
Representation is the start, right? But what do you do to hold the person accountable once they're in office? A lot of times we think that we have done our duty by voting, and then that's where our duties end. But no, people have to be held to account. You have to, be in the faces of these people who represent you to make sure that they do what they say they're supposed to do. And I'm not suggesting that it's an easy thing at all, because I understand the psyche of people who are like, you know what, I've done my part. I already voted. You said you were going to do this, so you should just do that. But I think about, like, I'm a parent. I have a soon to be 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. And if I ask them to do something, they know that I want them to do it, but I got to stay on them. I got to I got to check on him. Hey, did you do what I asked you to do? Hey, you said you were going to do this, and I still see that you have not done that yet, right? In a lot of respects, you kind of have to treat your politicians like you treat your kids. You got to follow up with them. You have to hold them to account. You have to show them how to treat you.
So with that point, a lot of people have said that Barack Obama didn't do stuff for Black people, or he didn't do stuff for people in general. What do you think about that?
I think there's some truth to that. But when I say there's truth to that, I, I I also say, but you have to keep it in context. Many of the things that he wanted to do outside of doing them by executive order were blocked by a House and Senate that didn't want it to happen for him. And so you can't you can't look at his legacy in a vacuum
Right.
and say, oh well, he just didn't
Some
do
of the
anything.
things you saw that got blocked that he was trying to do.
Every damn thing. I mean, anything that was not what the Republican House and Senate wanted was blocked. And look, again, I'm not a political scientist.
I hear
Um,
you. I hear
I'm
you.
not a historian, so
Your
I would
mind.
have to pull the data.
Yeah.
But I there's been.
I t- what about this one? Now, now we know, I remember when Hurricane Katrina happened, right? I remember that there was a telethon, and back then Kanye West was a different person. He got in the telethon and he said, "We know that they don't care about Black people."
No, he said more than that. And I'm going to tell you because I'm a photographer as well, and I had to do what we call an in studio for Hot 97 right after that event, and I talked to, not a long conversation, but I had a little conversation with Kanye about what he said, and I was like, "Yo, thanks for saying it." I mean, he took a huge hit, and you saw even later on in one of his other records, he talked about that. He was like, "Yo, I wish I had never said anything," but um,
Wait, just for the record, he
yeah,
said George Bush doesn't care about Black people.
yep, he did. And you could tell when I was talking to him, I could tell that he regretted saying it the way that he did, but that's what it felt like. That's exactly what it felt like. We were not cared about. And it wasn't just Bush, it was also the news. They were calling us refugees on the news. We are citizens. So, the media wants to be right all the time. They want you to be on their side. They want you to, but then they forget the things that they do that's kind of jacked up, like calling Black American citizens trying to get out of, flood areas, refugees.
They were also called looters. But I brought that up to say the fact that, America has a reputation of treating not just Black people, um, poor people or people of color, people who are disenfranchised. They treat us a certain way.
Yep.
And a lot of people saw Obama as he was going to change all that. Was that too much to put on his shoulders, I guess?
No, it's not too much to put on his shoulders. I mean, he campaigned on hope. Um, and I think it's important to have hope. I think it's really important to have hope. It's where you can find inspiration. It's where you can get people motivated and turn that motivation into discipline. Um, but I don't think he accounted for the level of opposition and lack of cooperation that he would get from the legislative branch of the government. I, I, I think he was maybe overly optimistic that he and his team could negotiate in goodwill on behalf of the American people the agenda that he had before him. Um, but it doesn't always work like that, you know. Uh, sometimes I always mix up that Mike Tyson quote where he's talking about, it's something like everybody thinks they can fight till they get punched in the mouth, something to that effect, right? Um, you know, I think he took a two-piece, you know, in the mouth repeatedly on behalf of the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. And I don't know that he had planned for that lack of cooperation, for the amount of vitriol that he would face. I thought that he was hopeful that he could be the difference, that he could make a difference, that he could negotiate with people who did not really want to negotiate, who really just wanted him to go away. And that's keeping it real. Now, could he have done more? I think uh, I think he's smart enough to uh, have maybe come up with some other ways of getting the job done, but to what extent? Like, unless you're just going to be Rambo and just f everything up and deal with the aftermath later. um, I'm just not sure how much more effective he could have been with a legislative branch that was not supportive of what he was doing. It's hard to govern that way.
I remember, before Obama, I felt like, a lot of people had lost hope in America, right? Before Obama, we had 9/11, then we had 2 terms of Bush, and, we just kind of felt disillusioned, and we were just like, you know, again, that America doesn't care about Black people. I think we all just kind of, in that song Kanye said, I'm on TV talking like it's just you and me.
Yep.
Most of us were just like, yeah, how, And when we saw a Black man, or a person who looked Black, we were very much like, it gave us something to hold on to. And I think in a lot of ways it pacified us. And then you had Obama come in, and like you said, his hands were tied, so he didn't really do much. So you have someone come along, pacify you, who didn't really do much, and then, that's 8 years. And in the 8 years, the things that Bush had lined up kind of kept going, and that led right into the financial crisis and the bailout. So we're kind of, I feel like when it comes to politics, we're kind of playing this game where, they'll pacify you 1 year at a time and just keep doing what they're doing behind the scenes, or to keep their money straight. Meanwhile, we're just something that they deal with in their own way. And I think in that sense, having a figurehead like Obama wasn't good. And we're still coming down off Obama. That's why we're talking about it. And we're still hanging on to this idea of hope that he put out there. All that to say that, we're in this fragile place, and I do think there is some victimhood in the African American culture. All of these things are kind of like wrapped up, and we're just moving through the times. And I personally want us to see us get really serious, and not serious politically, but serious with how we treat each other, how we treat community, and what we're really take responsibility for our actions.
Yeah. And Alexi, that is a huge piece of bread to bite, right? Your mouth getting dry, you got no water, you know, you're not getting like the soft bread, you're getting the hard, you know, jagged, rip up your mouth type bread. You got no water. Um, and so you gotta break it down, right? You gotta find a way to contribute to that dream that you have. Um, people ask me, um, you know, over the past year, what was I out um, doing a lot of the protests. I'm not a protester, dude. I I I, I have friends who are protest types, and I love them. I'm like, yo, we need you. It's not who I am. Um, I am a builder. I'm a connector. I'm a motivator. Um, I'm a teacher. And so I use those core competencies, these things that I know I'm really good at doing, and I try to build our next, generation of leaders with those efforts, right? Um, I try to show by example on the way that you can think about a thing and how you can use the way you think as influence over your circle of influence. Um, it takes all types. It takes the people who want to F stuff up, like to be like, look, we're tired of this. We are going to choose violence because you don't hear us when we choose peace. It takes those types, but it also takes the type of person who can sit down and talk to people who are in power and make them see that there are levels to this. There are levels to protest. There are levels of fighting back. There are levels of uh, ways that this system that oppresses so many can be changed. So how do I start? I like to work with the youth. First of all, I have 2 children, so I start with them. I try to raise good citizens, good humans, right? And make them to understand that, you know, life is going to be challenging, um, but they have to keep working hard. They have to keep working hard towards their goals, um, and not rest on their laurels, and not think that things are just going to be okay because, you know, it is today. I make them to understand that they have to keep pressing. Um, you know, for like the last, I don't know, maybe 20 years, um, I work with my fraternity and our young men's program, the Young Achievers. And, you know, it's amazing seeing a young man, you know, come into himself. I usually do our oratorical contest prep, and we deal with very real world conversations, topics, just like the things that we're talking about right now. They're doing debate on these topics, and I push them, and I teach them how to speak, do public speaking, and how to influence a crowd, influence an audience, um, and use their words for the betterment of themselves, but also the people that they're presenting to. Um, I I I try to do my part to protect Black women, um, by you know talking to men, especially Black men, about the way they view the women in their lives, especially Black women. Black women get crapped on by the world, by the world. And we don't do enough to protect them as Black men. And then on top of not doing enough to protect them, so many of us are part of the reason why they're being harmed. So, I advocate for Black women all the time, even in situations where I could potentially put myself in danger, because it's that important to me. Um, I've been talking to a young man. He's about 27. Um, he made a comment on social media about Black women being hard to love. And, we got to discourse, and I said, my brother, I said, listen, you want to talk? Give me a call. Let's talk. Let's have a real conversation about what you're saying. Because when I started digging into why he's saying this, he put himself in a position to be taken advantage of by a woman who happens to be Black. But I said to him, I said, what you're experiencing has little to do with her race, but has everything to do with how you make decisions for yourself, how you advocate for yourself. And, I'm working with him, but I challenged him to not throw Black women under the bus because of one or two experiences that he didn't have to be in. I'm challenging him to question how he makes decisions. I'm challenging him to assess, what he really wants for himself, and to look inward instead of blaming outward. So these are the types of conversations I don't think we have enough of. We, there are many other things that I think people can be doing around uniting each other. But I think, I don't think we look inward enough.
Mm.
I don't think while we are not a monolith, I think Black people in particular in this country, and I'm not just saying African Americans, because there's not just African American people here who are Black. I think Black people in this country, because no matter where we go in the world, we're still Black. We are still typically very hated in many places of this world, and we persist regardless because we have to. We're not just going to go away because we are hated. But I think there are so many things that we can and should be doing to really break cycles, but they start small. They start in small places, like me having a conversation with this young man. And to me, I believe in the touch one, touch many, touch one, reach many, right? if I can get him to kind of break his cycle, who knows who he can impact. And I know I'm talking a lot, so you need to jump in and let me know.
Good. No, listen, I'm throwing hard stuff at you to let you react to it. So, I'm putting you under the fire a little bit.
I want to tell you a quick story. When I was, I don't know, maybe like 21, 22, I visited this program that one of my frat brothers was running. And he had us kind of mentoring these high school students. And one of the students, she looked at me and she said, you're in college, but you look so young. And I said, yeah. I said, oh, I graduated high school when I was 16. And she kind of perked up. I didn't pay really much any mind. But I noticed that she, was starting to now listen to me. Because she was 16 at the time. She was around 16, I would say. And she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. She was going to be graduating high school soon. And, she kind of, this is why these kids were in this program, right? They were looking for mentors to help give them some guidance. And us being early 20s. We were not far removed from where they were at the time. A couple of years later, I'm on, I think, blackplanet.com, and I get an email, and I get a note on there, and the person is like, "Hey, I know you don't remember me, but you came and you spoke to us when I was in high school, and I just wanted to let you know that when you told me you graduated when you were 16, I decided that I was definitely going to go to college." So she was in college. A couple of years later, she finds me somewhere else on social media. She's like, "Hey, I know you don't remember me." And I did remember her at this point.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
like, I know you don't remember me, but um, you know, you talked to me about, being 16 and being a graduate. And I just want you to know that I just graduated and I'm about to become a teacher. We talked a little bit back and forth, kind of lost contact again. Years go by. She reaches out to me again. She finds me on Facebook. And she's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I just finished my master's and now I'm about to pursue my doctorate." She, we lose contact. We're kind of in contact. You know how it is on Facebook. You just,
Sure.
see people. And then, like, one of the next times I see her, she's giving me a shout out when she finishes her doctorate and is now a professor. And she was like, "Thanks for believing in a little black girl."
Mm.
And man, I'm like trying not to get emotional, but I touched one person who went on to touch many, right? We don't acknowledge the power of small things. Me going to talk to that group of students, it wasn't a huge lift for me, but I think about all of the lives that have been impacted by that one action. By me saying, "Yes, frat, I will come down and I will talk to your students," right? We think that what we have to do, and again, this comes back to my theme of balance. We think that what we have to do is on the extremes, either really do a whole lot or we really do a whole lot of nothing. When sometimes a small gesture, a small effort can yield very large results over time. So, I think, when people are listening to this, I want them to think about maybe a small thing they can do. It could be just smiling at someone and be like, "Hey, I hope you have a great day." Like, we have the power to change the world, but we don't have to do that lift alone.
Right.
We don't have to be Hercules. We can be ourselves, and we can create change. But we got to believe that we can do that. Sometimes um, we need to see that small things can have big consequence, can have huge effect, and then find a way to have impact on our own.
Really powerful stuff. I appreciate all of that. I'm a big supporter in small steps and the little things that we do and making a difference in whatever way we can. And I do think that us working together, supporting each other, is the solution to our problems. And I think we exactly agree on most of that. And we're on the same page. That's what this whole podcast is about. It's highlighting voices, giving a clarity and depth and, in the midst of all of the noise out there. So with all of that said, we're going to take a really quick break and we'll be right back after the break.
All right, sounds great.